Whether it's with her kids, who she calls her biggest teachers, or the Alzheimer's and dementia patients she works with as a certified validation therapist, Shareen Klasing has learned to meet people where they are and to pay attention. She'll share with us the unexpected gifts that she's found in being fully present to others. Shareen Klasing.
So yeah, Janine, that was awesome, and it's super great to come up right after a writer. I just want to say something really fast. So I got together with Dale on Sunday, and I was telling her this story about this video that I saw recently with Simon Sinek. I don't know if any of you know who he is, but he was talking about these reporters who are interviewing like professional athletes right before a big game or whatever, maybe some high school kids or whatever, and he said the interviewers are always asking the stupidest question, the same question every time. Are you nervous? And he said every single athlete answered the same way. And they said, I'm so excited, I'm really excited. And he's like, you know, their hands are sweaty and their heart's beating fast and they've got butterflies in their stomach, and he's like, but they're saying they're excited. He said, so he's a speaker and he talks to big groups of people. He said, so the next time, he said, I'm going to go to a big event, I'm going to say to myself before I go out there, I'm excited. So he tried it. He said, I'm excited. He said it really worked. It made him feel really good. So I just want you guys to know that I'm super, super, super excited to be here. Okay, so hidden gifts. I really, really like this theme. It reminded me of the I Spy books. You know, those I Spy books where they have all the hidden treasures. Well, my kids and I, we loved those. We spent so much time together looking at those and trying to find all the hidden gifts or hidden treasures. And there was always one item that was super hard to find, but we never gave up. We just kept looking until we did. Well, I realized that those I Spy books are kind of what it's like when we listen wholeheartedly. When we listen without judgment, without expectations or any assumptions. When we listen with our mind wide open. And it's like when we're paying very, very close attention to someone, when we're very present. The gifts or the treasure that we'll find hiding under judgment, under expectations, pain, and fear is a vision that's clear and pure. We'll find acceptance, we'll find purpose, we'll find joy, and we'll find love. So it's a picture of my mom and my grandmother, and it's a picture of my grandmother shortly before she moved into a nursing home. She was when she moved in, it was probably one of the saddest days for me and my family. She was in the mid stages of dementia, and she could no longer live at home. She was living alone. It was not safe for her too. So my mom and her sisters moved her into a nursing home, and it was a true nursing home, just like what you thought. It was in the early 1990s. It was a very, very sad and lonely place. It was really depressing to go and visit her. But I remember the first time I went and I walked through the front door, and it was just like, you know, you can imagine that odor that you smell. It was just awful. So eventually we moved her to a better place, and I was so grateful for that. But I realized there was something that I noticed about both of those facilities, and it was the wheelchair-lined hallways. So I would go and visit her, and there would be people sitting in their wheelchairs just lined up along the hallways every time I went, and it was the same people sitting in the same places, and they'd be crying or moaning or staring blankly out into space, and I was like, what is the point? I just didn't understand that. I didn't get it. And I remember very clearly, I had been visiting my grandmother, and I was leaving, and I was walking down that hallway, and I just said, you know, I asked God, I was like, what is their purpose? What is it? I mean, I don't get it. And yet I knew that they had to have one because they were still living. Their hearts were beating, they were breathing, they were still here. So I knew that they had to have a purpose. But I just couldn't figure out what it was. So several years later, after my grandmother passed away, I got married, I had kids, and I mostly raised them. I decided I wanted to be a personal trainer. And I really enjoyed seniors, so I was like, I'm going to train seniors. And I think I really actually chose seniors because I thought it would be a little bit less intimidating and they wouldn't be so judgmental if I wasn't very good. But anyway, while I was studying to be a personal trainer with my very good friend, somebody sent me a video of two women, Gladys Wilson and Naomi File. Let me show you. That's Gladys and Naomi. Gladys Wilson is living in a nursing home, and she's in the final phases of Alzheimer's. She's very inward. She was non-communicative, non-verbal. Thank you. She was in, did a lot of repetitive motion, you know, like she would and that's a really common symptom of somebody who's like in the final phases of Alzheimer's. And Naomi File was working with her, and Naomi File was using an approach that she developed called validation therapy. And validation therapy is a specific technique of communicating with people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And what happened from the start of that video to the end of that video was remarkable. It was just amazing what Naomi was able to do with Gladys. I think I cried after the first one, and I think I sat there and watched it 10 times in a row. I just was mesmerized. And I knew right then and there that I had to find Naomi File, and I had to find out about validation therapy. Did they offer a course? Could I do something? And it was like a calling. I was determined. So that's what I did. I Googled Naomi File, and I found her, and I found validation therapy, and I called them, and as luck would have it, they had just started their very first webinar class. They were teaching like in pockets of the United States, just barely, like in Pittsburgh or Minnesota. So I was just so fortunate. The class was 9 months long, and they would meet, so we would like every Monday night, we'd all be online looking at each other. And 2 weekends out of the 9 months, we would meet in person, and it was in Chicago, so people all over the country were coming in. And I had to have practicum hours, so my study buddy from Personal Trainer hooked me up with her mother-in-law who worked at King Brevard, and I started working with two residents in their memory loss unit. The class was great. I loved it. I learned that in order for validation to work, I needed to do a few things. I needed to center myself before I went in to visit a resident. That meant I had to clear my mind. I would take a deep breath. I would let go of all the stresses or any of the problems that I had for that day or whatever, and I would go in and be completely present with that resident. I also needed to meet that resident exactly where they were. Not try to get them where I was, but meet them right where they were. So if they were crying and needed to get home so that they could be there when their children got off the school bus, that's where I would meet them. And then I needed to listen, and I needed to listen, and I needed to listen. Validation does work because you're meeting the person right where they are. You're giving them permission to be there. When you acknowledge where they are and give them space to share their feelings and their stories, their stress and their frustration levels are reduced. I saw it. I watch it every day. They'll be able to express to you how they're feeling, even if it doesn't make sense to us. The stories that they say, even if it doesn't make sense to us. At our very last class, our instructor said something that changed everything for me, changed my entire perspective. She said, If you pay close attention, you will be surprised at how often you will hear them say something very profound. They'll say something quite clear, very coherent, deep and thought-provoking, but you have to pay attention. I was like, oh my God. I could not wait to get back to King Brevard. I mean, I was like so eager. Like, what are they going to say? I was on the edge of my seat. What are they going to teach me? How is my life going to be changed? What better, what can they say that's going to make my life better? What little nugget can I take? And I have to say that I have never, ever been disappointed. Every single time I am with a resident, there's something that I take away. It changed it's like everything turned around for me, the whole experience. So it was no longer about me going in there and helping them and giving them what they needed. It was about me going in there, and I was like, okay, how are they gonna make my life better? What am I gonna get out of this? And then I thought about those wheelchair-lined hallways, and I realized that yes, they have a purpose. It's just that we have to pay attention. We need to hear what they're saying, even if they're not saying anything, just looking at us. We have to pay close attention so that we can receive those special gifts. I'm so grateful for learning this because it helped me to listen deeply to someone who's so important to me at a time when it really mattered. This is me and my son, Johnny. So a couple of years ago, my son, my quiet, sensitive, incredibly talented, creative son, got into some trouble. And it was some pretty big trouble. My heart's really pounding now. It sent his father and I reeling. It just seemed so bizarre. It just like came out of nowhere. I was not expecting it. I didn't understand how this was happening to him. We've always had a good relationship and I wasn't taking this personally, but I was at a complete loss. I never saw it coming. I remember when we brought him home that day and he was sitting between us, and I was looking at him and I was thinking to myself, how did I miss this? How did I not see something? I just didn't understand. But I also said to myself, sitting there looking at him, whatever I need to do to understand, whatever I need to do to help him, to know him, to get through this, I'm going to do whatever it is. So think of the scariest time in your life. Can you think of the scariest time in your life? Well, for me, this was the scariest time in my life. I don't think I'd ever been more afraid. I had no idea what was going to happen. I had no idea what was going on in my son's head. Was he sad? Was he depressed? Was he suicidal? Was he going to be able to recover from this? Was I going to be able to help him? There were so many questions, and these questions were not easily answered. I didn't know what to do. I don't think I've ever been more afraid. So I pray a lot. That's what I do. I pray a lot. But I'm going to tell you, I have never, ever in my whole life prayed like I prayed then. I was in a constant state of prayer, asking for help, for guidance, for comfort, for peace, just to be with my son, just to feel you around me. I was in a constant, I'd wake up in the middle of the night, first thing I would do was pray. And something happened that only God could make happen. I had, in the midst of all of this unknown, frightening, scary time, confusing time, I had this deep sense of peace come over me. Deep. It was like my shield around me. I could feel it, this peace. And I knew, this might get hard, I knew that no matter what, even if the very worst thing happened, that God had Johnny right here in the palm of his hand. No matter what. He was never, ever going to let him go. And I have to say that this piece gave me the ability and the space to move forward. I was able to move. I was able to put some, and it was like within 3 days of this. I mean, we're still just reeling from it all. So I was, in this piece, I was able to seek the help and the guidance that I needed. I needed to know how to help my son, how to help my family. This piece gave me the strength to keep moving, to keep searching, and to not give up. And things started to show up. Remember, I heard some podcasts, and it was just so helpful. It was very relevant. I met people who somehow had just what I needed to hear. I was reading books. I sought outside help. Things just started to show up right on target, everything I needed. And then this book fell in my lap, and it's changed everything for me. It was exactly what I needed. It was everything I needed to understand how my behavior could either hinder our relationship, my relationship with Johnny, or how my behavior could foster and help him. So when I was with Johnny, I paid close attention to what was working and what was not working. The more questions I asked, the more stressed he became. The more advice I gave, unsolicited advice, the more he closed up. As a parent, even when your child doesn't have any serious problems, it's really hard to not give advice. Can you imagine how hard it is when your kid is in serious problems and not give advice? It was not easy, but I was vigilant. I knew the best thing that I could do was stop asking a million questions and listen. I realized I could not initiate conversations. They had to happen naturally. And when I did, and when those conversations did happen, I needed to listen. And I mean listen. No comments, no questions, just listen. How was I going to help my child if I didn't understand, and he needed to feel safe, and he needed to feel trust? He needed me to come without any judgment, without any expectations, without any assumptions, no agenda. I needed to empty myself of all thoughts. I needed to come with a clean slate. And so, randomly and very unexpectedly, we started having talks. And he would talk and open up and share his thoughts, and I would listen. I was so eager to listen, just like that teacher in my validation class when she said, pay attention, they'll say something really profound. That's how it was, just like that. Many times I wanted to say something, inject my opinion, give advice, but soon I realized that when I did that, the talking would cease. Did he feel like he couldn't come to me and be who he was, say what he wanted, truly share himself? So eventually I learned. I did not want the talking to end, to stop. So when he started talking and opening up, whenever I felt like I wanted to say something or ask a question, I didn't. I just didn't. Even if I thought it was important. I just listened. I deeply, deeply listened. And what happened was a relationship that I had never experienced before start to develop. He shared himself with me. I was getting to know him like I had never known him before. We were pulled up from the depths of fear and standing on solid ground. He knew he could trust me with himself, and he understood how hard I was working to be what he needed, to be what we both needed. Not everything is perfect. Just like regular kids, that we still have some kinks, we still have life lessons to learn, but the relationship, the foundation that we have now would not exist if I had not learned to listen with my heart wide open. accepting everything, judging nothing. I am deeply grateful for this profound power of listening. I've known since I was very little that the best gift you can give someone is your presence. It's what I really wanted from my mom. She was a young mother, 5 kids by the time she was 23 years old. So getting her undivided attention was not easy. It was a rare thing. But to this day, those rare times that we had together are etched in my memory. Even today, I can feel the feelings I had on each one of those occasions. I felt so loved. I felt seen. I felt so much joy. Just to be with my mother, for my mother to be with me, really, really with me. So this is a quote Johnny picked out for this for me. So when you're listening to somebody completely, attentively, then you are listening not only to the words, but also to the feeling of what is being conveyed, to the whole of it, not part of it. I've learned that when we are paying attention and listening deeply and are really present, when we are only in this moment, no matter what we're doing, we find peace and joy and love and happiness. We see clearer, we look deeper, we experience great love. We are released from the past and the future. And I know these times of being truly present is not a one-sided occurrence. Both of us together are in each other's complete and undivided presence. We don't have to wait for something drastic to happen like Alzheimer's or a child in trouble to pay close attention to each other, to listen deeply. Why can we not come to each other quietly, intently, purposefully, with open hearts and open minds? These gifts don't need to be hiding. They can come right out in the open. Listen without judgment. Listen. Pay attention. And you will be showered with the gifts of deep, loving relationships. Thank you.
I hesitate to speak because I feel like just a pause after that. I do think, though, you're going to have to get used to being excited because you should be on the speaker circuit. I think it's such a message that we all need to hear. And I know for myself, my son went through a hard time. And I think having the vulnerability to show your family and to know that many people in this room have or are going through the very same thing. That's a big reason why we're here. We are not alone. And you're offering your wisdom of what helped your son and what brought you together. So thank you so much, Shareen.
Thank you
so much. Does anyone have a question for Shareen?
What's the name of the book? Yeah.
The Available Parent. In fact, the author is from LaGrange, I think. It was a fantastic book. It was really, really, really great. It was perfect. It was spot on. I want to say something about Johnny really quickly because I was practicing today at work and my coworker had no idea, what trouble, that my son was in trouble, and she's like, oh my God. She's like, I don't know what trouble your son's in, but it sounds awful. So I just want to say he didn't kill anybody and he's really good, all right? So I mean, it was bad, but we're recovering from it. So,
sorry. Anybody else?
So I do have a question about the dementia part.
yes.
So when you say work, you were at work today, and then you also mentioned you do validation therapy. What exactly do you do?
So when I got certified as a validation therapist, I wasn't working. I was volunteering at King Brevard, so then I had private clients. So people would hire me and I would either or both work with their loved one who had Alzheimer's or dementia and be with them and actually performing and doing validation. But I would also work with the family members and helping them understand, giving them some tips and techniques of how to communicate with their loved ones and support them in that. So then, but I never left King Brevard and so then there was a job that opened up there, and they offered me the job, and so that's where I work, and so I do a whole bunch of different things there, and working in the memory loss unit is part of it, but I also work with the independent residents, and so yeah, it's really an awesome job. I love it so much. So yeah. So
Anybody else? Shareen, thank you.
oh yeah, thank you.